Hello everyone, welcome to the Cypher Money channel. Today we're going to interview with Eric, who is the early investor in Handshake. We know Handshake is super hard this week, so today we are very happy to talk with Eric from Primitive Ventures. So the first question, you are the early investor for the Handshake. Most of the investors don't do anything for the projects, right?
Well, actually, it's funny. My partner and a couple of investors who I really respect think that it's a really bad idea to do too much work. My partner was laughing at me and saying, like, you're only going to be a good investor once you stop wanting to be like a 劳动. 你不要再劳动，你不要想当一个劳动人。Like, don't be a laborer.
Yeah.
Which I thought was funny. But actually, I enjoy it. Like, I'm doing this because I like it. And I do think that, there is something to be said for when you get really, really involved with the project. Like, I know, a lot of other investors, like, they care a lot about having, for example, like information rights on paper. Yeah. And it's never been something we really care that much about. That means, like, we're so out of touch with these guys. Our normal style, both at blockchain and at Primitive with Davi, has been like, we're helping them day to day with hiring, we're helping them day to day with messaging, with strategy. I think it's a better way to invest. It's certainly a more, enjoyable and entertaining way to invest.
Yeah. Handshake is doing something like a layer 1 blockchain. They are doing their own blockchain, right? Why are they choose to doing their own blockchain, but not to doing something like layer 2 on top of the Ethereum?
It's almost like a philosophical question, right? The question being basically like, does it make sense to have, a chain that's doing a lot of different stuff, and you're kind of sharing resources with people that have very different incentives than you do? Or does it make sense to have sort of, a chain that's dedicated to one very specific thing? Personally, I think the idea of like this big shared sort of computational resource that Ethereum does, where it's like everyone's sharing the same state, everyone's sharing the same storage, it leads to a lot of weird incentives. I don't want to get too far into this because I feel like this question, like we could talk for an hour about sort of, the different approaches between like, do Cosmos. So Handshake is this chain that's designed to do one thing super, super well, and that is to be a root zone for decentralized domains. And it's not, it's not doing anything other than that. It's not doing subdomains. It's not doing anything else. It's just going to be the root zone. And as a result, it's designed around that, very, very specifically. There's these covenants that allow you to both fairly auction the names and then also sort of transfer and update the names. Those are very like purpose built for this exact use case. They don't do anything else. And as a result, I think, the case could be made that there's a lot less to attack on Handshake maybe than there would be on something like Ethereum. It's not a Turing complete, it's a much more simple sort of a blockchain.
Mm-hmm. We all know the code start for the POW is very hard. Why Handshake is so succeed for the very beginning? Many miners come to the Handshake chain.
I think the reason, and you asked why this was so successful. I agree, it has been really successful. I think it's pretty simple, right? It's like it's been a long time before there's been any proof of work blockchains that are actually worth anything, right? Like, even at a glance, like you look, there's Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is obviously worth mining. There's like, after that, there was the next wave with like Ethereum and Zcash. And I think the next project that really like, that anyone thought of as like a really serious, like this might have actual value, this might be a useful thing, was probably Grin. And then since then, most of these things, like what people in China call xiaoquangbi, like these like, POW coins, they're mostly, in my opinion, I don't want to call them scams, but they're not, there's not a lot behind them. They're mostly kind of, schemes by the people that launched them to get wealthy quickly. And there's not much more to them than that. Whereas Handshake, it's the use case is really straightforward, right? Like people want decentralized domains. This is a great way to do it. You have now a really nice trust anchor with a blockchain. A lot of the negative things about blockchains, like they're really slow, they're really inefficient. These are things that don't really matter for like a root zone. And the things that really do, matter for a root zone, like super high availability and like a really obvious like way to say, okay, this is the consensus, truth, is things that blockchains are really good at. So I think like even a lot of miners, like maybe there's a misunderstanding, I think, in the West of like that miners are just totally like brainless, just pointing their ASICs at whatever, some algorithm is telling them is the most profitable at any given second. But that's not, most of the miners I know are not like that at all. They think a lot about what they're mining. They think a lot about, how long they want to hold, whether they want to use leverage to hedge, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of these sort of, the older miners that have been in the game for a long time that have a decent cushion of cash, when they saw Handshake, they were like, this is awesome. And as a result, it became more and more valuable. And then I think it was at some point like 10x more valuable than Ethereum to mine. And so a lot of people switched over to it. And then you got, it's the opposite of like the cold start was over, you get this nice self-fulfilling cycle.
The next question is, who is the users? Are they buy the domain on the GoDaddy and cheap domain something, or they are the new users from blockchain users? They are Bitcoin holders, Ethereum holders, something.
I love that question. It's both. So we've seen a lot of people from the traditional domain world. Those guys are interesting because so like, I don't know if you're familiar, but like there was like Namecoin, there was like ENS, Blockstack to some extent is trying to do this. There have been a lot of attempts at like, let's do decentralized domains. Yeah. And when we were doing due diligence on those as a fund, we talked to people in the domain space. And they were typically very negative about these projects. They don't really fit in with how domains work right now. They're unlikely to get adoption, whatever. Whereas Handshake, when I've talked to domainers about it, they're super excited about it. And I think the key thing to understand there is that Handshake only tries to replace the root zone. Mm-hmm. And so the root zone is like this file that's literally a big long text file that ICANN and VeriSign and a bunch of these entities maintain, but ICANN has ultimate authority over it. And it just tells you, okay, .com, who administers that? .net, who administers that? And so if you want to add, so for example, there's all these new domains a couple of years ago. There's like .cool, .capital. Yeah. There's actually a .sucks, which is a really funny story. If you think about it, like when you register one of those new domains, all you're doing is you're saying, hey, ICANN, we want to add like, 20 lines to this text file. There's been, basically at every level of sort of the existing domain system, there's been a lot of malfeasance. There's been a lot of, what basically looks like corruption to me. And so people that have been in the domain game for a long time are just really sick of this stuff. And I think a lot of them got really excited about Handshake. There's also a lot of them that are still quite skeptical though. So, it's, it goes both ways. And then the other half of the community is much more like crypto people. Someone that cares about open source, that cares about open access to software, that cares about, software freedom, that cares about decentralization, and maybe is not that into crypto. So what we found was kind of cool about this project is a lot of people, there's some guy on Twitter, I think he was working at Stripe, and he was saying that like, he was worried that a lot of his colleagues were like going to think of him as like that crypto guy now, because he had been like really anti-crypto, and then when he found out about Handshake, he was like, this is actually really cool. Yeah. So I think it is. The use case is like straightforward enough and kind of obviously useful enough that it's converted a lot of people that were otherwise highly skeptical of, our blockchain is actually useful for anything.
The first question will be, can you share something about the potential of the 二级域名?
And so the question is, on Handshake, and this is an important thing to understand that I think a lot of people don't get, is that on Handshake, all of these names are TLDs. So if you register, if you look on Handshake, like I can pull up on the sort of the leaderboard, but the most expensive names that have sold so far, the top name was .crypto. And so you have, you could have Henry.crypto, you could have Nervos.crypto, you could have Handshake.crypto. Yeah. And then you have, the opposite. So you have like, there's you could just go like crypto itself, just a bare TLD. There's .coin, there's I think there's .margin. There's a whole bunch of these out there. I got .2D, which I think is kind of a fun one. And yeah, you can just give out these second level domains. And so at the current state of the project, like for example, for my this domain that I bought, so I have like 2D. I just told people if they DM me on Twitter, if they just send me a DM, I'll just give them a free like .2D domain. It's free and like you can keep it for life or whatever. No guarantees, it'll be very stable. And so some people DM me and I've like assigned them this like flat.2D and I think manga.2D or something. But pretty quickly, what's nice about Handshake is that these Handshake TLDs, from the perspective of all the infrastructure that currently works on traditional TLDs, it's very, very similar. And so any like, Namecheap, Park.io, like all of these guys that are currently selling second level domains, they can very easily sell second level domains for Handshake. And so I think that's what we're going to see a lot of, is like a lot of people go to Namebase to buy these top level domains. And then they can also on Namebase, sell second level domains, and they can sell them through a whole network of registrars that are currently selling, traditional SLDs. So it's really cool, because if you think about it, it's kind of like an income producing asset, right? Yeah. If you buy a name, it's like really cool. Especially, you could imagine like you got .smith or something, and then you sell like Joe Smith, John Smith, Jack Smith, whatever. So I think that's like kind of an interesting asset.
Actually, I buy many domains on GoDaddy.com, and one day I just found the services is just suck. I just want to switch my domain from GoDaddy to another site just like net.com, the process is terrible. I think it can really be fixed on Name-based, on the Handshake. We can switch the domain name very easily and buy the cryptos. Yeah, because if I want to buy something on the internet, currently I have to use the Visa card or something, PayPal something.
In point of fact, I mean, so like a lot of my friends think it's crazy to like buy stuff with Bitcoin or whatever. And the reason that they're against it is mostly that like a lot of times when you buy something with Bitcoin, a couple of years later, it turns out to be way more expensive than you thought it was. I think it's easier to buy stuff with Bitcoin.
68% is distribution to the developers or the open source developers. Can you talk more about the plan of the token distribution plan?
Basically, the idea there was that like any project, whether it's successful or not, is mostly going to be determined by, in the beginning especially, whether it's able to attract a lot of developers.
Yes.
A lot of these projects that just raised ICOs or something, they can just pay a bunch of like smart people who actually have no interest in the project to keep developing on it. And so I've seen this with there's a lot of projects that I think of as total shitcoins, and then I'll meet someone who I'm really impressed with, and it's like they're on the team for this project. What's going on? And then it's like, oh, it's because like they're getting paid twice market salary to work on this stupid thing. With Handshake, there's no company, there's no ICO. I mean, there's no one to pay these developers. So if anyone's going to work on it, it's because they're interested in it. Yeah. And so what you see is something very similar to Bitcoin, where there's people that work at other companies as a day job, and maybe those companies are interfacing with Handshake, and so they're being paid by that company to work on Handshake stuff. And so the idea here was like, okay, if you want to raise like a huge army of developers to work on this project, then like one way to do it would be airdrop in a way that only developers can get access to it. I think there's like two types of miners, right? There's miners that are like, maybe they're fairly leveraged, or they don't have a lot of cash reserves. And miners like that, they mine, and then they sell for like some margin above what they mined for, and they're just constantly selling. Yeah. And that's great. Like that, what that is that's what proof of work is supposed to be, right? Like these guys are doing useful work, and then they're distributing coins out to whoever wants to buy them. On the other hand, you have miners that are mining because they actually think the project is cool. The 6 block guys who I know pretty well, they're basically mining to hold. I think one of our friends convinced them to sell him a little bit, but like they're not really selling. And I think the price action in the long term, I mean, I'm obviously really optimistic about it. I hold a lot of Handshake, and I'm not selling it. And the reason it's to me, it's an obvious bet. I mean, so it's like, okay, every time someone uses this chain, every time someone wants to register a new a name, the coin is getting burned. And I think, this is another thing where it's like, we haven't really done a lot of publicity or whatever for this because we're still accumulating it ourselves. And so we're not in any like huge rush to get a lot of competition there. So we've been kind of quiet about this, but like, I think it's at this point, since we are talking about the project anyway, like the amount of Handshake that's been burned is crazy. Like the project's already, I think we're on week 7 right now, or week 8. And we've already burned like more than Maker, which is a old and venerable project that's like been around for a long time in terms of like USD value burn. And the burn is just steadily increasing week on week on week. So it's impressive. I mean, to be honest, it's actually it's greatly exceeding my expectations, because I thought it would be a slow start, and instead it's been like off to the races since day one.
Yeah, actually, I very enjoy for the bidding. Yeah, I have bid.
Oh my God.
5 domain every day.
Oh my God. That's the problem, dude. It's so addictive. It's so fun. It's ridiculous. I was telling
and you're feeling so suck when your domain is gone.
Oh, when you get sniped. Oh my God. Dude, like my dad and I actually are both really like big eBay people. Yeah. And my dad collects like a million different things, and I collect some stuff too. And both of us are just like, crazy hoarders, and we'll go on eBay and just like, bid on some weird stuff. And like, it's just fun. Like anyone that's used eBay a lot, like you just get really into it, and like you get in these bidding wars, and it's exciting. And that same dynamic applies to these Handshake names so much. And it's super funny now, because like all the kind of like, I don't want to say whales, but like, mini whales that hang out in our Discord or whatever, like they all know each other, and like they'll post in the Discord and be like, did you buy this name? Like I wanted that name or whatever. And they're like fighting. It's super funny. It's great. And people are really nice. Like the community is really cool. Yeah. So it's been a lot of fun. It's certainly the most sort of like, entertaining and chill community I've been a part of for quite a while. Okay. So last question for the Handshake. Can you share us
what kind of the domain name that you have now and something you can sharing and you think that is interesting?
I mean, so I bought Beida, like the school I went to in China. I managed to win that. I got stench. So the word stench in English means like 就是一种特别臭的味道，就非常恶心的味道。I bought this domain because now if someone pisses me off, I'm going to give them like an SLD. You know, like if this interview goes bad, then I'm going to make like henry.stench. And what else do I have? I got like LMAO. So that one's like a fun one.
Thank you, Eric, for sharing so many things. And if you want to learn how to bet on the name base, or if you want to get more information from Handshake, please join our groups. Remember to follow us and sharing this video. Thank you. Bye-bye.